Hello and welcome to Season 2, Episode 1 of The 4 at 4. Your panel for the show is comprised of four amazing ladies who not only are all published authors and well-known activists and advocates in family law, but have renowned expertise in their own unique fields that offer great input into topics of the world today. Please welcome Melody Brooke with MelodyBrooke.com, marriage and family counselor, corporate consultant, actress, and producer. Monica Shimonik with MomsUnshackled.com, a certified health coach and lobbyist. Sherry Palmer with Fixed Family Courts, constitutional scholar, co-founder of National Family Law Policy Center. And Catherine McWillie, who is the founder of CustodyCalculations.com, retired LAPD officer, parental alienation, and CPS conflict expert. I'm your host, Lorelai. Today's topic is about dads participating more than ever.
Hi, so today we're going to be talking about how much the participation of fathers has increased. I posted an article on that recently. So in that article, we found out that since 1982, fathers have increased their participation, huge increase. So in 1982, 43% of dads said they had never changed a diaper. Today, it's down to 3%. So I bet all you moms are jumping for joy, saying, hooray, I'm getting help. They also said they're participating more in household chores. And actually the divide between the amount of free time that each parent has now is only about an hour difference. They're saying dads have 2 hours of free time, whereas moms have 1 hour of free time. So I don't know if you agree or disagree. And remember, these are statistics, so your situation might be a little different. So let us know how your dad participates. The reason we're talking about this topic today is not just because the statistics have changed, but because January is one of the months that is the highest month for filing divorces. And Catherine let me know that the first 3 months of the year is actually called divorce season. So the first 3 months, more divorces are filed in that time period than the other months of the year. And we think that a lot of that has to do with, you didn't want to file during the holidays or you want to get a fresh start in the new year. So what we'd like to do is talk to you about what are you noticing with your male counterpart, and are you even realizing the contribution that he is making? So I'm going to throw that over to Melody and ask her what she's been experiencing with people coming into her lately, last year, maybe even recently in the last few days. Is that what you see, Melody? Do you see more women saying, hey, look, that's it, I'm fed up? And do you think they're not noticing what their male counterpart is contributing, and that they're only thinking of, maybe how they're feeling in their relationship personally?
I think that more women are allowing their husbands to participate more, although I think that often women do not recognize the contribution that dads have, because dads have a different way of interacting with their kids than moms typically. Typically women focus more on the nurturing behaviors and the nurturing activities, the feeding, the changing, whereas the dads tend to interact more playfully and roughhouse with them, and the kids need both. And yet more dads are doing the nurturing behaviors too. So I think we have to recognize that they're not alone now, and it used to be very different, but the reasons for divorce are different now than they used to be. I think they used to be more focused on the fact that the woman, in my era growing up, raising kids, my ex, very little to do with the caring of my kids. So, and I think that had a big part to do with why I worked in the relationship and wanted to leave. That's beginning to change. People are looking at different aspects of their relationship.
Well, yeah, but I would say that, probably a lot of dads are going to take offense if we say they don't take on a nurturing role, because I think that
I say that it's happening more, that men are more part of it.
And I don't know that dads didn't want to do it before. I think it was not accepted before. And I like that. I mean, I kind of like and I don't like. You said moms are allowing it. I don't know if they're allowing it as much as it's accepted, right?
Because a lot of moms, because of culturally the way women we see ourselves as the mom, the most important caregiver. I think that is part of the way we're culturally raised. And as a result, a lot of moms really stop their husbands from participating in that dad role.
Okay, so you're talking about when the moms feel like, hey, you know what, you're the dad, so you shouldn't be doing this.
Right.
So I see where you're coming from, and I'm hoping that moms watching this are changing their language, because you know what, dad's rights aren't subject to moms anymore, and moms didn't like it when their rights were subject to dads, so they need to knock it off. There's a term that was used way back in the 1600s. It was patriae potestas. It goes all the way back to Roman time, and that meant father was the head of the household. He was the master, right? He was over women, he was over children. And by the way, on my live audio feed yesterday, where I was talking about best interests coming from the welfare laws and things like that, actually it goes back further. It still does have to do with the welfare of the children, but it actually comes from paternal authority. And I bet guys are going to be shocked about that, right? Because it actually comes from their authority. So what happens, dads lost their authority and it went to moms over the tender years. This is just a quick update. And now it's shifted to where they're not supposed to be picking genders. And the culture is accepting the genders participating, both of them participating, but that equal participation they are griping isn't there. And what studies are showing now is that dads are participating equally a lot of the time, especially the dads of millennial children.
Yes.
So social expectations have changed and the legal system needs to change. And I want to give an example of like how my dad participated. Okay. So and my dad, he wasn't my natural father. My natural father, I didn't know. I was actually taken from my mom for a short period of time because he and she had a very volatile relationship and it got very abusive. They were afraid I was going to get hurt. So they actually took me from my mother and put me into a foster home until she would agree not to be with him anymore. That still happens to a lot of women. So he wasn't actually allowed to participate or be my dad. So when she got remarried, she got with another male when I was about 2 years old. He adopted me, and he's the one that served as my father role, right? And he taught me a lot of hands-on things that my mom never did, right? She didn't have an interest in these things. He taught me how to play baseball. He taught me how to make paper mache kind of things. He taught me about engineering because that was his job. So a lot of aspects of his job. And so he did more of the outdoor things with me. I don't remember doing anything outdoor with my mom. I remember my mom feeding us, forcing me to go down for naps. I hated naps. So I actually was closer to my dad because I felt like he was more, I know this sounds weird, I felt like he was more nurturing, even though my mom was the one feeding me and washing my clothes, right? And that it was for a short period of time, but I won't go into that. So do you have any examples of how what you got from your dad, Melody?
My mom and dad divorced when I was 2.5.
Okay.
Mom remarried to my stepdad, who I adore, but he was not present as a father figure. So I didn't have any real experience with that father figure much of my.
Now, did you ever find out why he wasn't present though? Was he present out of his own choice or present because of?
Well, my biological father went on, had another family and got very involved with the other family and had very little to do with us. And my stepfather was all about making money. His whole thing was he was going to be a millionaire by the time he was 30. So he was working all the time. And he didn't, I don't think he even began to understand. And he was so young when he was only 20 when my mom and he got married. He took on, 3 kids. So I just don't think he had those instincts. He just didn't, know how to be that role.
So why do you think that is? Go ahead.
No, I was just going to say at this point, I think you started to touch upon a subject that we really need to cover a little bit more, going back to the fact that, yes, the roles have changed between mothers and fathers, but historically, women and children were property, and
Right.
women had no say so. They could not take their children. They could not, make that decision. It didn't matter what courts they appealed to. And so really, it's a recent change in the last, this century that women started to be able to get custody of their children. And I think historically, we need to really recognize this, because there's this perception that women have always had the right, that women have always been the primary caretaker. But in actuality, historically, the men had to spend most of their time to provide to the family, and women had to be there to not only provide for the family and help, but also to care for the children. And just as we've started to raise ourselves above the level in civilization with technology and cars, and we haven't had to put so much into food, shelter, and clothing, men and women have been able to share in more roles and have been able to spend more time with the children if they chose to, or they had more options to care for the children. So of course we're going to see those roles change, but historically, I think we need to not lose context that women getting children or having access to make decisions for the children. And by the way, that's not to say that it was ever fair to mothers or fathers. I definitely support shared custody. And I think that it's really been an injustice to families in this country and around the world that we do not have shared custody and that parents do not have access to parent their children, as much as possible and have access. And we don't hold anybody accountable when they don't, mothers or fathers, get custody time.
I think there's a problem with modeling. A lot of what we know about parenting comes from what we witnessed as a child, right? So as women, we grow into thinking, just automatically step that role as primary caretaker, and often men just go into the primary breadwinner role, regardless of the fact that both people may be working. And so then, for my generation, it was largely, yes, working and then also taking care of the kids. So having both jobs, and the dad just, working. And now that's shifting remarkably. So I think that education has a lot to do with that. And just changes in cultural recognition of the need and the role of fathers in their kids' lives. And that is going to make a big shift in the way we have to look at parenting and separations.
Yeah, and I read that a lot of father participation right now has been limited by the workforce, the workplace. Another interesting thing that I read in this article was that fathers are going through a lot of the guilt feelings that moms went through that moms do go through when they're choosing whether or not to have a career or stay home with the children. Well, theirs isn't between staying home with the children or a career. Theirs is whether or not to take that next career step because they want to be with their children more. And so they're in a position that is very similar. And I think women need to realize and relate back to the guy, the male, the father, and say, hey, you know what? We get it. We're there. We've been there, and help them through those things and help each other. Like you said, that will change, I think, some of the modeling. And if the workplaces start to give men some respect with when they need time, and the men and the women need to alternate when the children are ill, right? Mom shouldn't always take time off work. Dad should get to as well. And this is also for when they're not together. It shouldn't always be
a lot of times women have historically been penalized for taking time off from work and penalized for having children, and saying, well, I can't hire you because you have children, because that means you're going to be taking time off. So, as that has shifts to men taking more of that role, that reality is going to have to shift over in the workplace as well.
Right, but a lot of guys now, if they're not with the mom anymore, the mom's not with them, they end up getting penalized by the courts for taking time off because they're being charged child support based on the maximum income that they've earned. So even if the workplace shifts, they've got a problem with the court system.
Do you think that?
Well, I'm sorry, go ahead, Laura.
Oh, I was just gonna bring up earlier when Catherine mentioned around the world. I thought that was interesting, and I kind of wondered how is it different around the world? Do you think that the dads are ahead of the curve or behind the curve here in America?
I think that worldwide, that the issue of custody and child rearing is going through a huge shift, a huge transition, and nobody's really, we haven't landed feet first yet on, a good balance. I think we're either too far to the right or too far to the left, but we haven't found a middle ground yet, and that's going to take some time. But, mothers are, not the primary caretaker. There's a growing increase in number of fathers who are obtaining custody, and mothers are paying child support. And again, as I said, it's not fair to either one that both parents aren't able to be involved.
I'm glad you said that because the child loses when they lose a good parent, and the courts are choosing one parent over the other, and the child doesn't understand why that's happening, and then they go through feelings of abandonment and stress and anxiety and worry about that other parent and why they're not in their life. Speaking about around the world, Catherine, I don't know if you'll know this, but do they have changing tables in men's bathrooms around the world? Because I saw that they just passed that. Was in Massachusetts. They're going to have changing tables in fathers' bathrooms.
Men's rooms.
I have no idea the answer to that one.
Okay, well, yeah, I'm sure you wouldn't personally.
The question that I come to is, and in my experience, most of the time it's the person with the most money that wins. Mm-hmm. So right. That person that has the most money is usually the one that ends up winning custody if there's a real big custody battle. And if the parents don't recognize the damage that that's causing, but nevertheless, that's the case.
But if they're married, when you talk about how fathers' influence has increased, you were saying 3 times fold lately, is that because women are taking some of the financial burden off, or men are just catching up to the fact that they should be helping more? Why do you think it is that they're participating so much more? Why is that even news?
Again, I think it goes back to the transition, to the fact that the roles are changing. They're not as diverse as they used to be, with exclusive rights going to the mother of child rearing and exclusive father to, being the breadwinner. But I think it's also tied in a lot to child support. It's a huge incentive to, whoever takes custody of the kids gets an enormous increase in their income, and it's non-taxable. And I think that if we found a better balance with child support, taking away all the ability for both parents to provide for the children and giving it all to one parent does not make a fair situation to either parent, whether it's the father or the mother. It needs to be balanced, and we do not have good child support rules.
Well, I agree. I agree with you on child support not being fair or balanced, but I don't think that when, let's say, Lorelai's generation of kids, as I know a lot of them since I dance at the dance clubs and the dance competitions, that they're not even thinking about that. They don't think divorce will happen to them, and they're so excited. Like, if their partner gets pregnant, and I say partner because the majority of the ones I know, they're not married, and several of them are pregnant right now, and the guy is just as excited as the girl. And I don't think they don't think about any of that. They're just like, all right, I get to be dad. And, one of them's already been cut out. But for the most part, I see them just happily raising children from the beginning. And I don't know that same excitement occurred, in the early 1980s or 1970s. I mean, I couldn't say, I was young, but I think Lorelai's asking why Why is
There
the
was-
excitement different, maybe?
There was a movement toward that, and to some extent, you know, a lot of the more hippie generation were more paternal, more involved in the kids. That was kind of where that started, I think.
Well, I know my cousin gave her son dolls to play with, but
right. That was
he's not
something
grown yet.
that was started in the 70s, and I think this is just the progression of all of that movement, where women are working, and there was a whole Mr. Mom movie, right, that came out because that was starting to happen back then.
I love that movie.
And the more time goes on, the more awareness of, hey, mom's working, she's taking care of the house and the kids, dad's working, he's taking care of the kids, responsibilities are more shared.
Mm-hmm.
I want to go back and say, I absolutely think that fathers were excited, you know, when they found out they were going to be a parent, and mothers were excited. I don't think that's changed throughout time. So I'm not
But
sure that we're really clear on that.
But excited to participate. Excited to participate, because most of the guys that I knew when I was younger were like, ew, gross. I'm not changing diapers. Right. That's her job. So now they're excited about doing those things.
No, I think they absolutely were. You know, if we really, you know, there's always going to be those who weren't excited, did not want to change diapers. You know, that was kind of a masculine thing. But at the same time, I think you'll find that a lot of fathers did change diapers and, you know, did play with the babies, and, you know, there was interaction, you know. It's not something that's brand new, with the exception that they're more involved. And that's part of the women's movement.
Yes.
You know, that is absolutely the women's movement who stressed that fathers needed to be more involved. And we're losing fact of that was really part of the women's movement, to say, we, you know, cannot do everything. The fathers need to be involved, you know, to make this work, to be balanced, to the mothers.
But now what's happening is mothers are like, oh, well, he's not as good as me at that, or he doesn't really know all the details. That really doesn't matter. If they're going to separate, the dad will learn, just like the mom learned at some point in time in her life. I know when I first had a baby, I didn't have a clue. I didn't play with dolls when I was younger, and I didn't hang out with girls. I had no clue what to do.
So when you talk about that the dad involvement is up threefold, are you talking about after divorce, or are you talking about in general? Because what about while they're still married?
We're talking about while they're married. That article was actually about married couples.
Yeah, so to me that indicates that the reasons for divorce are shifting. So coming back to your original reason for sort of posting, right, this discussion, and I think that people are starting to divorce for not because they're fighting over household and kids and caretaking, that which I think will happen more with my generation. More it's about wanting other things, wanting a deeper, more real relationship, less fighting, more real intimacy, more emotional connection.
And more excitement. A lot of them are about more excitement. And I think that women need to really put this into perspective and say, look, now you're getting what you asked for, and it's confusing men. Why are you still unhappy, right? We're helping out more, so our relationship might not be perfect. And I think women's expectations in relationships have taken on an unrealistic expectation. I know you have a topic on that, Melody, that you teach, which we won't go into because we tend to get sidetracked. But you're right. This whole reason for discussing the topic is not just to bring awareness that men are participating more, and by gosh, they don't have to participate more, by the way, and participate to the level the mom expects in order to keep their rights if the relationship doesn't work out. That's not what we're saying. What we're saying is maybe women need to take a better look at the situation and say, you know what, he does do more, and he is bonded with the child, and just because it's not exactly how I want it shouldn't mean that I want to take the child from him And just because he doesn't know every little detail that I know shouldn't mean that I'm going to go to court and try to take the child from him because I don't want to be with him anymore.
Well, maybe that's why, like you said, most of them weren't even married. They weren't even thinking about the divorce aspect. They were just enjoying the relationship and that a child was coming and that they were going to be raising it.
Right, but they're not realizing how much dad really does participate in the bonding with the child, right? So when they're upset,
are some women preventing it on purpose? Are they wanting all the control?
Yes,
some do, and then they'll use it against it. So yeah, that's a good point, Lorelei. There are a lot of women that actually get in the way of the dad bonding with the child or having a relationship with the child, even in the marriage. And
yeah, exactly. Because I see two things online a lot. I see one where there's women's groups where they specifically talk about inhibiting the dad from doing certain things and how it's their job and their responsibility, and that they don't want him overly involved, or they don't agree with how he parents anymore and he should do it her way all the time. And then the other one that I see is, I've seen a comic where the women in the comic are doing everything, and the dad's standing there and she's trying to get everything done, and he's like, why didn't you ask me for help? And she's like, well, why didn't you just come in and help with this? So there's two types of thinking, and then there's also the control aspect. So
if a woman wants to stay in control, then she needs to not get divorced, because courts are changing. We are fighting for those rights to be respected equally. So she has actually more control than she's ever going to have. And if she thinks getting out of the marriage is going to give her more, we're trying to change that. So they need to think twice before they jump out of that relationship. They cared enough to make a baby with that person. They need to think about other ways to work through what's going on. And control is a tough thing to get over, but I'll tell you what, it's easier to get over than not having your kid with you.
It's a very difficult thing. Control is what the biggest issue I deal with in my counseling practice is people feeling like they need to have control. And of course, the saying is, insistence on control is addictive to a fantasy, because you can't control any one thing. And when you get stuck in that place of thinking that you're the mom, you should be in control of the child. That is part of our cultural bias toward women that gets away, and it causes women to not allow the dads to participate in their life. They don't even help the dads understand what they need to do. If they do something differently than they criticize them for it and makes them feel like they're not good enough, and interfere with the child's relationship with the dad in that way without even consciously sometimes realizing that's what you're doing.
And maybe that's where the great shift is coming in, and why you're seeing more dad participation. Maybe they are focusing on parenting together and showing, learning that together.
Yeah, I want to make sure that we're not, mother bashing here, because, the same power and control issues take place on both sides of parenting. Fathers leave marriages, mothers leave marriages. I would prefer happy endings all the time, but I think, there's sometimes very good justified reasons. And
I agree. There are dads that I know of that are super degrading and controlling over women. I think men, especially if they're old-fashioned traditional men where they expect the mother to have those roles, I find that there's more abusive behaviors with those type of thought processes from the males than usually the women. It puts a lot of pressure on women, makes them feel like they're never good enough. They can't ever get it right. And I don't know why they don't, feel like, well, they should do their own participating and do it the way they like and let mom do it the way she likes, but they don't seem to be able to shift. So I agree, Catherine. That's
a great point, Sherry. Both of them should be able to parent and support each other, but each be